Now, I have always loved languages. I've loved learning languages, learning about new languages. It's just always been the case for me. So today, on today's episode, I thought we'd talk a little bit about how do you learn another language, and we'll ask the cards about this, see what they come up with, and I'll talk about it a little bit as well. So thanks for tuning in. You're listening to Life's Potluck Buffet. I'm John Paulus, your host for today and every day, and I'll see you just after this brief musical soundbite. I saw that phrase the other day, musical soundbite, in some captioning for a article I was reading, so I like that. I mean, I think the technical word for it is a sting, when you know you have 3 seconds of music or so, but I like that musical soundbite as a way of communicating it to people. That's neat. All right, so today's question is, how do you learn another language? And so I have the cards in front of me, and I'm going to shuffle them 3 times. And then I'm going to split the deck, and I am going to shuffle them again, stepping away from the mic, because you know what happens. The mic blows up when you shuffle cards near it. I don't know why that is. Well, I guess it's kind of a high frequency sound, something like that. All right, the cards are shuffled. Okay, so now I cut the deck, and I'll pick the card on top. And we've asked the cards, how do you learn another language? All right, cards, what do you got? Something you thought was beyond you is actually within your capabilities. Card 29. Now let's look at this card. Once we realize that our wildest dreams are hardly the stuff other people's dreams are made of, we can start to accept that they are not fantasies but accurate predictions of our futures. Take the first step right now by identifying something you think is totally beyond your reach. What is it? Now plan the next step to achieving it. Oh, well, what a fitting card for today. Thank you, cards. What a fitting card for today's topic. Okay, so I think the cards are telling us step 1 is to understand that this is not beyond you, that learning another language is within your capabilities. This is actually a really good first step, because I see it so often where people say, well, I can't learn a language, that's, if I were younger, I'd be able to learn a language, or I don't know, I've never been good at languages. But if you speak any human language, which you probably do, then you can learn another language. It's just a matter of starting by understanding that it's possible, and also starting by understanding that the goal here is to enjoy it, and the goal is to have understanding of other people speaking and to communicate with them as well. That's the only goal. And it doesn't mean things need to be perfect, and this doesn't mean that you need to be like the most fluent, impressive speaker. And, look around YouTube. There are a lot of fluent, impressive speakers of languages that are not their heart language, that they grew up with, or that they see as their kind of their, what we might call their first language. I love watching those videos where someone will walk into a place and they'll like talk in whatever language it is, and people will be shocked. It's like, oh, you speak this language, and that's cool, but that is a different story. That's, if you're gonna make those YouTube videos, then you should be able to surprise people with your language ability, so that they're shocked. But if you're for the 99.999% of us who learn languages for other reasons, we don't need to worry about that. The key is to take that first step and say, this language is within my capabilities. Any language really is. Even ones that are extremely, extremely tough are partially within all of our capabilities, and that's all we need. I think, for example, Diné, the people that used to be called Navajo in American English. And that language, I know from reading about that language and from speakers of that language that that is a language that it is very, unless you start with it as like a child, baby, it is hard to get that language right. You really need to be immersed. But that's okay. I mean, making yourself understood does not mean being a perfect kind of speaker of a language. So, so that's step one. Step two is to learn some words. Honestly, that's my approach, and I've learned several languages to decent proficiency, and I have always started, if it's a language that I can't, well, I'll get to the second step, which is really important. I'll get to in a second. But for languages for which I'm not embedded in a community, the first thing I do is learn some words. And it doesn't need to be the words that are, the ones that the language books always start with. Yeah, you might want to learn a greeting. That's an easy way to start, right? Learning a greeting is always a good first way, just to signal to a group that they're visible, right? That you're not that you're trying to connect, and you see them, and that you see that this group that speaks this language is here and present, and you're respecting that. And so learning a greeting in a language is always, I think, a great thing. But then taking it kind of like learning a words just that you need, and not getting so caught up in grammar and in like full sentences and speaking like, you're going to give a speech in this language, which, believe me, is my first hope, is that I'll be able to give a long speech about something in language, or the standard mark of a decent amount of fluency is telling a joke or explaining a funny situation in a language, right? That's a kind of standard mark of like you've really reached a new level with that language. But the first thing is just to learn one word. Now, I'll give you an example, and use it in a context. So my example is, a couple of years back, I was looking for numbing peppers. I don't if you're familiar with Sichuan cuisine. Numbing pepper is an important element in some dishes. And it's like, it looks like a black pepper, a little larger, but it has a kind of numbing sensation. That's its hence the name, numbing pepper. And so I looked up it in a there's a store near me that the owners and people who run the store are Mandarin speakers. And so I learned how to say this in Mandarin to kind of try to ask them if they had it. And I only needed to say the one word to them. I didn't need to say, like, pardon me, do you have any numbing peppers in your fine establishment? You know what I mean? Like, that's what I want to say, of course. It's like, that's my goal. That's my goal, is to come up with some speech like that. Good day, sir. Have you any mandarins? Have you any numbing peppers in this fine establishment? Like that kind of thing. So, but the first step is to learn a word. If at all possible, the second step is to embed yourself and constantly return to the community that you're trying to communicate with, and speak with them in their language. And that, if you can go to the place in the world where this community is most prevalent, that's wonderful. That's how I've learned a couple of languages, is to be present in that community and to, in one case, take language classes in that community while living in that community. And, that is the gold standard way to learn another language. The equivalent of that, if you can't get to that other country, which, that takes a lot of money, time, effort, all of which we have as limited resources, right? So you might not be able to get to that country, right? So if you are able to, in your community, find the speakers of that language and seek them out and, talk to them and say, that you want to learn this language and that you are, going to try to talk to them and speak with them and as much as you can. That is another way of doing it. A wonderful way. And you will learn and it's great. Is it as effective as being in the place in the world where there's a large community of those speakers and that every day you could only communicate in that language? No, of course not. But it's a really good second way. A third way to learn another language is to do the same thing online. Yeah, you can learn, there are a lot of good resources out there for you to listen to and also in some cases to speak with people, live speakers. That seeking out that community online is the other version of meeting that community in the place where you are. And it's another version of the meeting that community in the place where they are, predominantly. And so those are some ways to learn another language, and there are different levels. If you want to learn like casual stuff about the one language, then learning some words, especially around things that you need that you could communicate with. And notice that communicating with others is always key. I think that's the thread that runs through all of these, is that I find that the biggest hurdle to language proficiency is actually speaking yourself to the group. There are languages that I can understand very well when I'm listening to them, but like on the spot, I'm not very good at like formulating speech, right? So making that your first goal to like be able to formulate speech is the really, really excellent way and the gold standard way to learn another language. So that is the thread that runs throughout, is to seek to be able to speak, to write, and to communicate for and with the language community that you're speaking with so that you will learn it faster, because there are things that you need. And we all, anybody who has been in a place where a language that they're not familiar with is spoken, they'll always remember those words for things that they needed. And they had to go into, say, some store, usually that's a situation, right, and ask for something that they needed, and that word stays with you for life, right? That shows you how that technique I was talking about like learning a word and then like another word is a wonderful way. And you don't even need to learn whole sentences, and that gets you started. And then you could start, learning phrases and things like that. But being embedded in a community, whether it is in the place where the people who speak the language you're looking for are speaking it in everyday life, and you are going to be speaking it in everyday life, that's gold standard. Number two, the place where people are in your communities, in your neighborhoods, in your cities and towns where they're speaking the language you're looking to learn. Finding those people and talking to them, saying, hey, I want to learn how to speak this language. That's two. Three, the online communities and online resources, which are great as well to be able to learn how people speak other languages. I like going to websites where the people who speak the language will respond to questions about the language. Like, oh, how do I say, I'm trying to say this, but I don't know if this is the right way to say it, right? And they respond. There are many different sites like that. Checking those out, really nice way to learn a little phrase or two. But overall, you learn another language by speaking it with people who are heart speakers of that language, first language speakers of that language. That's the way you learn that language. So keep that all in mind. Thanks for listening today. If you have any questions about learning another language, drop them in the comments, and hopefully other people will pick them up who are language speakers in whatever language you're looking to learn. So, and let us know, what language are you looking to learn? So I hope you have a great day, and I'll see you next time on Life's Potluck Buffet.